seems to be working fine. So I'm just going to play you a little bit of music. I get into a certain amount of trouble with, not that they've ever done anything to me, but with YouTube, they blocked a couple of videos because I apparently didn't have the right to the music. But they cannot possibly block this one because I know who has the rights to it. Good morning. Yes, I'm just waiting on a phone call with a certain gentleman who travels all over the world, but I would describe him as the ultimate truthers. In fact, I'm sure that he's the only non-American that's been and visited Stephen Avery. I don't think that there's any others, because I think mainly it's been obviously family and people who live fairly nearby to either in Wisconsin or nearby. Anyway, so as I was saying earlier, what is it that? Oh, sorry, I should explain as well. Give him credit. The piece of music you just heard was one that I recorded with a keyboard player from down in Rothbury. Rothbury achieved a certain amount of notoriety a while back when a certain person called Raoul Moat went and kind of hid in Rothbury for a few days. Eventually, they tried to get him out. Paul Gascoigne intervened to try and. He was being chased by the police because of a murder, I believe, in Newcastle, or an attempted murder or something like that. And ultimately, it just ended up with him being shot by a police marksman because Raoul was not for putting down his weapon. Oh, here we go. Here we go. I think that's often been the case. Good day.
Hello, my friend. How are you?
I'm not too bad at all. I was just
good.
Yeah. What you been up to?
Flying.
Mm-hmm.
I just got back to Australia this morning. So,
I was going to say when you got the time wrong, I thought 10:30. Well, that was an hour ago. So yes, I thought, well, he must be back in Oz, back in Straya.
In sandpaper country.
But no. In the the land of the ashes. So were the Australian public kind of pleased that they retained the ashes, or did they really secretly want to win them outright? Rather than it be a 2-2 draw.
Oh well, I guess two things about that. One, I was in the UK when all that finished. So I haven't really got the local sentiment, but my good, solid, and reliable guess is that we would have wanted to win, especially against the old foe.
You mean the whinging Poms?
Yeah, that lot. And I actually went out to the Oval test. I think I might have told you that. I went out there for a few hours.
Right.
And but I think we made a strategic mistake.
Yes.
I mean, England were the better side. We shouldn't have bowled first. We should have batted first. It didn't make sense to me that they made that choice. But anyway, we'll see.
It kind of
it was overall was good series. That's the main thing.
Yeah, it sometimes does make sense to bowl first if the feeling among the team is that the strength of the team is in bowling, then try and make the most of whatever conditions might be in your favour in the first day. But I think in the first day they only took. Yeah. Did they? I don't think they even bowled England out in the first day. So it didn't. That doesn't make sense. But no, it was good, and I think the whole summer's been good.
Yeah, no, it has been really good. Everyone wants to see a contest.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. I mean, you want your team to win if possible, but as long as there's a contest, that makes any sport enjoyable.
That's right.
So, and we definitely had that. So that was all good all round.
Yep. How are the St Kilda doing? The St Kilda Saints, how are they doing? Are they still near the bottom?
Yeah, we're in. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to give you an immediate update.
No.
The right home, but they're into the final series now for both the Australian rules football and rugby. So
yes,
they didn't make the final. So they're done for the year. So, but there's always next year, Paul. Correct?
Yep, absolutely. I mean, at one time they were top of the league. Not long after we saw them.
That's right.
They went to the top of the league, but then they went up
in the sun.
Yeah.
So it's.
I still laugh about the fact that it was getting near half time, wasn't it? and we were saying, like, what are we going to do with this banner? Because we've carried this thing everywhere, And it was the last thing on the to-do list, So I get my camera ready, and luckily I bought some of that. You remember the masking tape?
Yes.
Which was important for fixing it on, and so I took the photos, and you'd said to me about the pies, the 4 and 20 pies, because they were nice, weren't they?
Yeah.
And you said, right, off you go to the bar, So I was quite sneaky, because what I did was I got the four drinks, even though there was only going to be the two of us that were going to drink them.
That's right.
And as I'm coming back, because I mean, I've taken the photographs and everything, you know, and thought, oh, that's good, you know, I can relax now. So I comes back and I just as I'm coming into the entrance, you know, where you get into where the seating is, there's this big security guard, you know, coming towards me, you know, and I think, oh, what they're doing, you know, and I just turned the corner, looked up, and I could see the security guards with Eric Jose and Stacey, and I immediately thought, well, shall I go up there, or shall I just wander along this side and sit somewhere else until they're gone?
I wish I was a bit more kind of attuned to the moment, because I would have loved to take in a video of what was actually going on. So,
yes.
But I was just sort of, I guess I was probably thinking, oh crap, what's going to happen here, right? So, but I think, you know what, Paul, I think we suffered from being good, honest message takers or message givers, because I'm sure at many sporting events that they get lots of yahoos trying to do the wrong thing and say the wrong thing, etc., or annoy the crowd by whatever they're doing. Whereas we had we're up in the heavens there, away from everyone, with the banner without interrupting it. We did it at an interval, I think, whether it was 3/4 time or whatever. But of course, you know, all the security staff are trained to do a job. So whilst our little thing was very politely innocuous, I think we just suffered from being at that place at that time. So, but we got the pictures to prove it. So
we got the pictures. I mean, if the pair of them had have been taken in, you know, for questioning and stuff, that would have made the story even better, wouldn't it? You know,
That's right.
Eric Jose and Stacey go the extra mile to create awareness. You know, that would have.
Mike, I'm not sure who would have bailed them out. I mean, you and I would have been down at the pub, so they
exactly
been struggling to find.
I wouldn't bother.
Can you imagine what Eric Jose would have been like? He only just got a passport, right? I mean, he'd be, like, the ink was still wet on his passport. He would have been really in big trouble.
Not only that, but the you don't get to choose your smoked sausage when you're inside. You don't get to choose Dr. Pepper when you're inside.
Well, what did you say about a smoked sausage in jail? I don't know whether that's the conversation.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes. So
depends who your cellmate is, I guess.
Yeah. So I don't know if you're probably keeping an eye on the chat, but that's interesting, Deb. Yes, on Millbilly's channel, about the fact that Tom Pearce, you know, that Teresa worked for, that apparently she left. I heard on the dispatch calls on Millbilly's channel that a girl who worked with Teresa at Tom Pearce Photography calls in to say she left because of Tom's violent temper.
No, that's interesting.
Yeah, yep.
Well, when you say she left, she was still working for them up to that day. She was as a contractor.
Yeah, she'd got that.
So
yeah, she was doing her own stuff, certainly with Auto Trader, wasn't she? He's also the person.
So when that girl says she left due to that behaviour, what does she mean by left? Left what?
Interesting. Yeah, he's also the person who reports her missing, and he's also in the dispatch calls suggesting to police to check out the Avies, but I can't find anyone in by the police. Yeah, that's
one of the things that crossed my mind just the other day. I was writing something. I think it was on Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm not, you know, the super sleuth that some of the supporters are and do just an amazing job. But I presume Teresa would have had appointments scheduled for the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Let's just use those 3 days, and especially Tuesday and Wednesday. I wonder if any of those clients who were scheduled for a visit from Teresa phoned up to say she didn't turn up, what's going on? Mm-hmm. I don't know whether that's been covered in the past, so forgive me if I should know that and I don't. But it struck me also as that whole issue about the lack of apparent concern where Teresa was by people who would normally be very concerned is all very bizarre to me.
Yeah.
And which includes Ryan, Scott, the family, the work environment, people who would have normally known or wanted to have known where Teresa was. And Teresa just lived. I mean, I've been outside her house a few times, and it's, you know, literally can be only no more than 100 yards, 150 yards from the main family home, same side of the street. It's in a rural road.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you would go that time without even just wandering down to the house next door just to see if she's there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never really had a satisfactory explanation to all of that, or not that I need it personally, but I never heard a satisfactory explanation to all that, and particularly so from Scott Blowdorn, that is, because you live with her. If the person you live with and it's the family property, she's not coming home when she normally would be home. I mean, I'd be ringing the first night. Where is she? Mrs. Horbach, have you seen Teresa? She hasn't come home tonight. Wouldn't that be what you would normally do as a flatmate? Or at the very latest the next morning? But you would believe from the phone calls of the reporting of Teresa missing that no one got really concerned until Thursday, or at least late Wednesday night, right? So
yeah, I mean, also it is interesting, isn't it, that the missing person's poster was actually printed on the Wednesday, although she wasn't, Karen Holbert didn't phone in to say that she's missing until the Thursday. That was the third, wasn't it? That was the third. Printed on the second, and yet she's not even reported missing until the day later.
I mean, you're a father of girls, so am I.
Yep.
Your daughter's not around. I mean, she lived next door.
Yeah.
She's not at work. She's not there. I mean, it's just, there might be an innocent explanation to all of that.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard it, and that's what I would like to understand that better.
That's right. We don't know if maybe sometime, she did sort of stay out over at a friend's house. If there's been a bit of a party, apparently she was going to a party, wasn't she, on the Monday night? Maybe she was planning on not having much to do on the Tuesday. Maybe that was going to be a bit of a day off. But yeah, as you say,
it was Halloween anyway.
Yeah.
So maybe she was planning to go somewhere and stay overnight, but. Still, they'll give her the benefit of one day, but I don't understand the 2 days and then ultimately 3. So,
I mean, one of the things that I mentioned earlier, was something that's always concerned me, was that if Andy Coleman is told to write a report about that phone call the day that Stephen is released, or the day after, that was September of 2003, wasn't it?
September or early October, late September, I think.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Yes. Yeah.
That gives them 2 years. That gives Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department and the people above them 2 years to set something up. And I think they eventually realised once the depositions were going the way they were going, I think that's when they decided to, yes, it's time we put this plan into action. Yeah, and 2 weeks later, they were going to get Vogel and Koercion in, and a lot of people have said, that although Koercion was retired at the time, he's still the one behind it. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that Bushman gets called in.
That's definitely the case. There's no doubt about that.
Bushman gets called in to help with the investigation.
Yes,
it's.
The thing I like to look at things, hopefully not over simply. I like to look at the basic issues, and I think to myself, if any of the characters that we often refer to as people of interest, and I don't mean that necessarily people who are guilty, although they may be, but people of interest. If you're a totally innocent person, why wouldn't you talk to Kathleen Zellner and have a lawyer present, which is, I think, an appropriate thing to do, because you don't want to, make a slip up in what you say because you don't understand the law. But people like Ryan and others, even Scott for that matter, have effectively refused to talk in any meaningful way to the investigators. And there are others who have done likewise. And think, well, why aren't you talking? If you're innocent, if you've got nothing to do with this crime, as you purport that you do not, well then what's the problem about discussing it? What have you got to lose? Either you are involved, or you're indirectly involved, or you're tangentially involved, but you're involved, because otherwise you would talk, wouldn't you? With a lawyer present.
Unless you've been told by the police, just to keep quiet and not say a word.
That means you're involved, because that's a cover-up, right? Exactly. So that's still a level of involvement.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They bring the guilt on themselves, or the potential for the guilt on themselves, by being silent. And no one wants someone to be wrongfully accused. God, we've seen enough of that already. But if we see people genuinely making an attempt to tell them as they see it, such as Josh Radant did with his lawyer present, well, you go, okay, that's what you want people to do. And if their story is intact and their integrity is intact, well, then they've really got nothing to fear. In fact, they've got everything to hope for, and that is that any even improper accusations will be put to rest, because they've cleared the air on matters, which can't be fun to people who are genuinely innocent, who are still the subject of somewhat unfair and perhaps somewhat fair attacks by that lack of that lack of clarity as to their whereabouts and their involvement.
I don't know if there's quite a bit of excitement about the photographs, the thousands of photographs that have been released by CASO. Perhaps more interesting for me, though, was the tweet by TikTok Manitwok, who's been suggesting for the past 3 or 4 days doing comparisons of the Sikiki letter with other examples of handwriting, with the conclusion that it looks like Ryan Hilligus, which doesn't surprise me in the slightest, and I'm sure it doesn't surprise you either.
No, and in fairness to Ryan, it's all, if you like, speculation, and it's well thought through speculation. It's not reckless speculation. So I think the conclusions are a valid conclusion to come to, but allowing that element of fairness to him. I mean, his general behaviour, both currently and at the time of the events and at trial, give you no confidence that he's trustworthy or reliable in what he says. So the fact that he's been involved so intimately with this matter that you have to come to a view that he's got a lot more to answer for. Let me put it in those terms. There's a lot more that he needs to come clean on, so to speak. And if he's totally innocent and nothing's the problem, well then he shouldn't have a problem in doing that.
What I find interesting, though, is the fact that we have an expert in the case whose field of expertise is handwriting analysis. Nick Stokely. And yet they never asked him about it. And,
I mean, nothing on that front, Paul, nothing surprises me, because they're only going to ask the questions they already know the answer that they want. They don't want a handwriting expert to validate a letter if they believe the letter to be fake, right? Or unless it's not fake, but an implanted piece of evidence. So that doesn't surprise me in the least. It applies to any of a dozen different issues. like not wanting the coroner to come out,
Yeah.
the Manitowoc coroner to come out, all those sorts of things. Not interviewing or treating, as would normally be the case, Ryan, an ex-boyfriend, Scott, a flatmate, and others as potential suspects, and interviewing them as such. There's a whole host of those examples that just tell you that there wasn't a proper, independent, unbiased investigation done.
Mm-hmm.
This is just yet another example of that. I must just say, right at this point, I should take my hat off to all those people behind this work that's going on with photos and handwriting, etc. It's just, I mean, irrespective of anything else, it's a phenomenal effort that people are putting in to do this stuff. Now, if it proves to be true, it will be amazing. If it's not true, it doesn't take away from the effort, right? Yep. And you know, and there's a bunch of people. I'm not going to name them because I'll miss someone I should name, and I don't really know them all that well.
Yeah.
But you know, we know that we know of the name TikTok Manitowoc and Seven Pairs of Panties and a whole, you know, AC Rookie and all, and there's a whole lot of layers of people who that I assume they work together on these things. But it's just a phenomenal private effort to try to bring justice to Teresa and Stephen and Brendan, and I'm just in awe of the work that they do. Yep.
I mean, another one is your countryman, Dr. Silkman. Some of his videos on the Rubber Ducky channel have been excellent.
Yes.
You know, really
yes,
analyzing things, and you know, what I was gonna ask though is, could it be that the body was burned in an aluminium. Sorry, Americans, it's aluminum, isn't it? Because they haven't got the extra I at the end. In a smelter. But of course, we've got Scott Taddick, who works at a because obviously that's what Manitowoc, one of the things it's famous for, isn't it? It's aluminum factory. It created was it the Miro factory was where they created all sorts of stuff in aluminum. Sorry, I'm not going to say aluminium. Aluminium, we call it in the UK. So we're going to stick. What do you call it in Australia?
Same as you.
Aluminium. Good. Okay.
Well, it's spelled with an I on the end. That's right.
That's right. But it's the same stuff. It's the same stuff. And I'm sure we invented it before the Americans. So it makes me wonder, which smelter are they on about? Are they on about the one that Scott Taddick works at? Or is the letter referring to the one on the Avery salvage yard? The reason I ask that is because I still keep going back to this Paul Metz report on Zander Road of a smell, of a whoosh and a foul smell and cattle running around, knocking over fences, and the fact that we've got this clearly forged piece of paper with Teresa's phone number on the bottom, and Zander Road address. That is where the foul smell came from. And I think the dude was probably quite right, that the whole idea was to pin it on Steve, but the way that they were able to do it sort of changed over the various days, so that when they discovered, he had a bonfire. That's perfect. We can just dump them in there. I'm sure at one point the plan would have been to have dumped them in the smelter, wouldn't it? At the salvage yard.
Yes. Who knows what the so-called plan would have been.
I know it's speculation, but
I mean, you know, it's interesting. I asked a few of those questions earlier today. Hey, by the way, Paul, funnily enough, one of your videos you did, not one in the last half hour, but one earlier, about 12 hours ago, I was sitting on a plane in Singapore, waiting to take off, and I was on your live chat at that time. So, but that's by the by. But I asked a few questions of TikTok Manitowoc about the smelter, because I wasn't as aware of the existence of the smelter on the Avery property, as obviously a lot of other people were, even though it wasn't used. It was shown not to have been used at the time.
Yes.
But what it then made me think about was, well, if you follow the theory that's been developed here, that letter was written by Ryan, and you know, with the benefit of the doubt, passing to him, but let's assume for a moment it was.
Yep.
And my question is, what's the significance of the word Sikaki at the end as a sign-off?
Yes.
Well, how do you come up with that as an ending to a letter that ascribes to him, to Ryan, that is, if that is in fact true? So I don't know the answer to that. I actually asked a question in the flurry of stuff that was going on at the time. I don't know if I got an answer, but why would you come up with that as a name at the end of a letter, unless it was just purely random? So,
yes, I mean, as you say, that's an interesting thing. I remember seeing a video once where they suggested that it actually relates to some coordinates, because there's no actual place called Sikaki, is there?
not that I've ever heard.
No.
But why would you say, is it meant to be a name of person, or is it meant to be a locality? What is it meant to be? If you take the Ryan Hilligas theory about authoring that letter, why is he putting that at the end? Is my question. And what if he is? What significance is it in itself? I'm not sure, because it was always initially thought that it was some, reference to someone else. Let me just say that. So,
yes, I remember one time the Eddie Wayne Edwards, is that his name?
Yeah, Wayne Edwards. Yeah.
Yeah, there was speculation that it could be him involved, and there's in one bit of footage there's a large fella out the door of the courthouse, and they're thinking, it could have been him that came along and just to see what was happening. I think that's kind of been completely debunked.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
I think some of the key elements of this story is that I have absolutely no doubt Teresa left the property that afternoon on the 31st, and sometime between then and sometime later, she met her demise. That's not my theory. It's just my support of the theory.
Yeah.
And I don't see that that's not correct. But the question really is, who would have had the capacity and circumstance to get her to pull over? And if you think about it yourself, if you're driving along, and someone's either behind you and flashing lights or waving arms or whatever they might have been doing or not doing, you're kind of not immediately wanting to stop, are you? But you might, if you know who the person is.
Yes.
Or potentially. But you might in rural Wisconsin, because it's a fairly sort of friendly environment. Maybe it's just something that goes on. But I don't know. But I think my view is that the person responsible for her death is known to her.
Yes.
And known in either closely or indirectly known to her. And so from that point of view, then the letter, if that's true, then I think it's quite likely that the letter is an attempt to deflect the responsibility back to Avery, referring to their so-called smelter.
Yes.
But it doesn't really explain the Sikaki name, but maybe it doesn't need to. Maybe it's, I don't know. It'd be interesting to kind of analyse just that name of itself and see whether it's meaningful to something.
Yeah.
Things that I'd name, to write, if you're just going to chuck any name, why wouldn't you write Joe or John or Chuck or Bill or Mary or whomever, right?
Yes.
Why you come up with an elaborate name like that seems odd to me.
It does.
If we go with the Ryan theory, that is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, maybe it was just his, silly sense of humour. I'll just random letters, and and they could spend ages thinking, what does this mean, when it actually doesn't mean anything. Yeah. I get that.
Possibly, or maybe there's something in I don't think the author of that letter is trying to deliberately come up with some clever, clever puzzle to unravel.
No.
I mean, why would you need to do that, given the intent of the letter? If we say the intent is what we say it is, why didn't matter who signed it off. In fact, you could have no sign off on it at all, and it would
Exactly.
still be as valid as we say it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I did obviously a live earlier. I was the question was, what do we as truthers want? I'm sure you would agree with me that this idea that we just have people immediately released is not actually what we're wanting. Have you watched that thing, A Murder in the Park?
No, I haven't actually.
Oh, right.
And I remember you talking about it quite some time ago.
Yeah.
And I did try to find it, although of course I do know, because she told me at the time that Lynn has it on her channel, because I couldn't find it anywhere else.
No.
So I do really need to go and look at it. In fact, that might be something I might do to get myself a bit tired late tonight to go to sleep.
Yeah, it honestly, it is well worth watching. Very, very interesting. And there's even at one point, although it's not significant to the actual story, Mark Williams gets a mention in it.
Right. Okay.
Well, because the person that they managed to coerce to confess to this murder, and again, you'd have to see how they do this coercion of it is by getting other people to video other people saying, well, we think it's this old story, Simon, that's done it, and that's why he says, like, okay, I did it, and I'll take the lesser option of. They managed to convince him that unless he comes clean there and then in front of their video camera and gives them this false statement, it's going to be far worse for him. The typical scenario.
Oh God, the amount of that goes on is just frightening.
Yes.
Just frightening. I mentioned in the past that I've been reading this book called Convicting the Innocent, and it's an analysis of 250 exonerations in the US and the common threads that cause that wrongful conviction to occur. And it's unbelievably frightening of not only what the behaviour that goes on that causes false confessions and other things, but the silent support of that behaviour by the prosecutors and in fact the judges.
Yes.
They don't care what's truthful. They have an intent that they want to follow, and they don't care whether the truth is in the way of that or not. They'll just roll over the top of it.
Yeah. It's interesting in this Jody Jones case, the Luke Mitchell case. Although the lad was only 14, he's got a little bit of Stephen Avery about him, because he is no way is he going to admit to something that he didn't do. And apparently even the judge commented in a when they asked for sort of like a at one of the appeal stages to his conviction, even the judge who ultimately upheld his conviction said that the way that the police had treated him in the interrogation was completely wrong. So he'd actually managed to stick to his guns. It's it's funny when you get the people that say, well, he was inappropriate before and after, so therefore he's guilty. Well, what about the fact that the police were completely inappropriate with interviewing him? Are they not guilty of having done something wrong here?
Well, they live in another world of justice,
Yes. Yeah, that's what that you've just reminded me. That was something I was going to ask.
Unfettered by the fact that they don't fear at all the consequences of bad behaviour, none whatsoever. If you're only allowed to choose one law reform item to ensure existed in this matter, that would be the one. Take away immunity from prosecution at all levels of law enforcement, and you would see a dramatic drop in what's going on here. But you mentioned about Stephen and just getting him released. Would that be enough? Well, no, it wouldn't.
No.
But my view is that as a man and as a son and as a brother, he needs to be free. And irrespective of anything else, he's never going to admit to guilt simply because he didn't do it. But if someone turned around and said to him, we're going to let you out, provided you don't sue us, well, he wouldn't accept that. But I always think that the state's best option, something I've been thinking for at least half a year or more, is to let him out, right? Because they're going to, at some point, they're going to have to compensate him quite properly for what's gone on. But Stephen's motive at this stage of his life will be just to put all this behind him and live out what's left of his life with his parents and his siblings. And for the state, it's not in their interests, I would have thought, to have their senior law enforcement officials and other people under oath on a stand. That's going to play out really, really badly for the state of Wisconsin.
Absolutely.
And their best bet, in my view, is to go, well, gee whiz, not only have we done things wrong here, let's just accept that we have and encourage the process to release him. Now, they would hate the ego part of that. But it's to me, it's the best option for them. And I think, I think Stephen's approach would be, well, we can have a chat about what you have to compensate me with, but it will be based upon something that's fair and reasonable, and it won't be ridiculous. So.
No, what I was going to ask you very, very briefly, and then I'll let you go and watch Murder in the Park and other stuff. This I can't help thinking that for some of the guilters out there, it's simply a case of anybody like us who question what's going on here. We're sort of particularly if it's a fellow American questioning what's going on in Wisconsin, that person is then, in their eyes, being almost unpatriotic by not supporting the government of that particular place. Did you ever get a sense of that?
Yeah, there is a certain chunk of that in the dialogue that goes on. But patriotism is best demonstrated by a commitment to the foundation principles of democracy, which are, the rule of law and, fairness to everyone. Just go and read, Lincoln, the Gettysburg Address and understand what democracy really should look like in the United States, and understand, particularly in the last, let's say, 40 years, maybe not quite that long, 30 years, how the political process has been allowed to cloud over the intent of democracy. In other words, politicians are ascribing a form of democracy that's just about being in charge and allegedly being the holders of all great knowledge. And so we end up with an America, with due respect to America, which I care about a lot, that has not evolved its criminal justice system in a way that most other Western countries have over the last 30 or 40 years. It's still locked back in this mentality of the 1960s and 70s and before, that says all we have to do is lock people up. And in worst case scenarios, even put them to death. And then we've done our job. And if you don't agree with that, you're un-American. I mean, that's just a load of bull. I mean, you're American if you stand up for what's right, from a humanitarian point of view and the principles of democracy. And if you question that sort of behavior that I've just described, you're being more American by participating in the debate and participating in the democracy of having a fairer society. That's what being a great American should be about, and what, for the most of its history, has always been about. And so it's this sort of confrontational approach to say, well, you're un-American if you think law enforcement wouldn't do bad things. You're un-American if you don't like the fact that people hold weapons of war in their cupboards at home. Or you're un-American if you start talking about having, a fairer and more accessible healthcare system. That's not being un-American. That's being a good human being. And then they can proudly talk about all the amazing things that America does so well, as if that in some way means that they don't have to face the reality of the things that they don't do so well. Being a great again, to use Mr. Trump's expression, is about acknowledging your weaknesses and improving them.
Yeah.
And this is one of the areas that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, I must admit, I've come across, because I've actually spoken to people who know a lot more about the history of America than I do. And one of the guys that I spoke to, a former pupil of mine, has pinned it, said straight up, one of the big problems they have in America is American exceptionalism. They think that they are unique, therefore what goes on in America is unique to them, and that whereas the rest of the world is saying, you should do something about your gun laws, you should do something about, your death penalties and all this kind of stuff, he actually pointed out that they've got this psyche that goes back hundreds of years to when America was first formed, and they're still sort of operating under the sort of rules that were laid down 250 years ago. Is that something you would subscribe to?
Yeah, I think there is certainly an element of that. I mean, it was a country that was created out of war, with not only the Great Britain, but also the Spanish and the Dutch and the French. Then their own internal war between the North and the South. It's a country that's hung on to aggression, and physical might has been part of the American psyche.
Yes.
And no one would admire people's courage to fight hard, which they've always done, particularly in international conflicts. But that doesn't make you great. It's how you deal with people in their totality. It's not about winners and losers. It's about trying to accommodate, for the most part, everybody, so they live a respectful life. And they don't all have to be the same. You don't even have to agree with their views, but they do have a right to be on planet Earth. And while they're on planet Earth, they should have the capacity or the potential to lead a respectful life. And I don't think in some of these major areas that we're talking about, because the justice system is something that we all benefit from, not just those who are actually convicted by it. The people who live in the civil society rely on a good justice system for that civil society. And when those areas need improvement, the people should embrace change rather than fight it. But there's a lot of vested interest, of course, in the United States in the prison systems and things that are allied to that, in the healthcare system and things that are allied to that, in the armaments industry and things that are allied to that. And those people have a lot of power and say. Now, people need to participate in democracy. It doesn't work unless you participate. And as I said, it might sound like I'm being critical, and in a way I am, but I'm being supportive in my criticism to say evolve as a nation. If you look at that Netflix thing I've mentioned in times gone by, and other discussions with you, Paul, that talks about, it's called 13th, which is about the 13th Amendment of the US Constitution. It talks about how we've got to this position we have today in the US with the prison system. I would thoroughly recommend people watch that. It goes for about an hour and a half, I think. It's not too long.
No,
but it gives you a great understanding of why we're in the position that we are today in the United States.
Is it not by the same woman, the producer Ava DuVernay, who did the Central Park Now They See Us?
I'm not. It may be.
I'm sure it is.
Sure
I'm sure
it's
the same producer.
It's a very, very, very good analysis of from the 1970s through to the now. And how they went from 400,000 people or so in prison in the 70s up to 2.3 million today. It's just, and all the entrails that go with that, along with that body. What was that body? That private body that actually seeks to actually create legislation to hand over in template form to politicians to enact laws that suit the members of that private body. I forget what it's called. Someone will know.
Was it the Cambridge?
Just to see the level of it's a group
Yeah,
in the US. It's a private
that's
lobby
right.
group.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was the yeah, no, that wasn't the Cambridge thing. That was a different thing altogether.
Yeah, but anyways, I won't tell the story properly if I try to guess. So
Sure.
I just would encourage listeners to go and see that,
Yep.
or watch it on Netflix. The 13th, it's called.
Exactly. I must just mention there's somebody who's again got a bit like Sikiki, quite a strange, a Korea Immittance. He's trying to post stuff, and somebody's taking offence at it because they keep getting it taken off. So keep trying, Akoya. You might get on.
I saw that being retracted.
Yeah.
I mean, that might be an interesting thing to. Maybe there's some deciphering of those letters that might tell us something. That's something. I don't know.
Some sort of anagram.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm going to let you go because that's nearly an hour. But have you spoken to the dude recently?
You mean like voice to voice discussion?
In any sort of context?
I've had a few like messages to and from him.
Is he feeling all right? Is he suffering from sunstroke or something? Or
I think he told me something that he had to go to the doctor. He had a bad case of havering.
Right.
He said he'd been overhavered, and I don't know where he got that from, but apparently there's some pill you can take for it, or some tonic called what's it called? Oh, Dr. Pepper. That's right.
Yes.
He was given a prescription for 2 dozen cans of Dr. Pepper to deal with extra havering that he has to deal with from time to time.
Oh, right. Okay. No, it's just that he did a live sort of chat thing. I think he called it a round robin. And towards towards the end, he actually says he actually praises me for doing some good stuff. And I thought, what? Is he okay?
He's unwell, right?
He must be unwell.
He has to be unwell, right?
Yes.
So,
okay. Right.
Yeah, but Paul, I can assert that as well. Your commitment to your videos in recent times always been critical, but the volume of work you put in is phenomenal, and so thanks for that from my point of view, let alone for everyone who loves to watch you.
Oh well, so, no, and for people that get in touch, and even some of the people that get in touch that aren't sort of complimentary, the sort of guilters, every now and again you'll get some interesting comments from them as well, So yeah, it's good, and of course, it's what's today's date? It's the 18th today. It's 12/7. It's 20 days till we get
the filing.
Kathleen Zellner's filing, and apparently she wants to send a bigger. She wants to enlarge the word limit.
Yeah, it's called that enlargement. It's called a havering motion. The ability to add more stuff than was intended.
Right.
So she's sort of havering motion.
Yeah. Okay, right. Well, enjoy your evening over there in Straya.
Thank you. It's coming up to 9:30.
Right.
PM.
Yep.
And lovely to speak to you. Thanks for everyone listening in and watching and writing comments. And Sharon Sunshine, you need some new glasses. I'll just make that comment after reading something you wrote there. So thanks anyway.
Okay, cheers, mate. Bye for now.
Best.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.